Great. Hi, everyone. Can see lots of familiar faces trickling in from online. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It is wonderful to have so many folks who have registered for this event and lots of interest. We have a fantastic panel, lots of really interesting discussion lined up for the conversation today. So I'm going to jump right into things. Hello, my name is Annalise and welcome to our CPE Speaker Series. Just as a brief introduction for those of you who might be joining us for the first time today, the Center for Practice Excellence is based out of the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy here at the University of Toronto, which is where I am based. And at our CPE Speaker Series, we focus on pharmacy education and training, research, and practice and innovation. So our monthly speaker series is really where we get to have the chance to chat collectively as a group with everyone online and discuss some of the most critical issues, and there are many, that are affecting our healthcare systems and pharmacy today. So just to get started, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement, acknowledging the land on which the University of Toronto operates, and as I mentioned, where I am based today. For thousands of years, this land has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'd like to recognize that this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and I'm very, very grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn with all of you on this land today. So for today's event, showcasing AI innovations in pharmacy, what does it mean for the education of pharmacists today and tomorrow? We're very lucky to have a fantastic panel joining us, and we'll begin today's event with introductions for our panelists and then demos of some of the AI tools our panelists are using. And then we'll move into a panel discussion on the impact of AI on the education of current and future pharmacists. So just for a few quick housekeeping items, especially for folks who might be new to our sessions, I'd just like to remind everyone that our sessions are recorded and posted online on our CPE YouTube channel, as well as on the Faculty of Pharmacy website here at the University of Toronto. I'll just ask that you please keep yourself muted, just because I think we'll have a lot of people joining us today, but feel free to keep your cameras on if you're comfortable. Any comments or questions can be put into the chat. I think we have a very packed agenda today, so I don't think we're going to be able to get to audience questions, but those will be triaged to our panelists afterwards. And we're happy to sort of carry on the conversation beyond today's event. So to begin, I have the absolute pleasure of getting to co-facilitate today's event with Minh-Hien, who is joining me online, and she'll be moderating our discussion today with our panelists. So Min, I'd like to just provide a brief introduction for you before we get started. Minh-Hien Lay is a pharmacist, educator, and researcher with 2 decades of experience in the pharmacy profession. She's a graduate of the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy, where she is currently an adjunct lecturer teaching in both the PharmD and PharmD for Pharmacists programs. Min is consistently exploring new teaching strategies to enrich her learners' experiences and is also pursuing a Master's of Science degree to enhance her own training experiences and education. Her research focuses on artificial intelligence and pharmacy education, and particularly on understanding how to best prepare pharmacy graduates to enter an AI-driven world and effectively use AI to optimize patient care. So I can think of no one better to lead us with this discussion today. Min, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Annalise, for that kind introduction. I have the pleasure of introducing all our 4 speakers today, and I'm going to introduce all 4 of them, and then we will move on to the demos after. So first, I have Andrew Bartlett, who is a lecturer in pharmacy practice and a PhD candidate at the University of Sydney Pharmacy School, which is based out of the Faculty of Medicine and Health. As a pharmacy owner with 30 years experience, he provides leadership in the areas of pharmacy management within the school's curriculum. Andrew also serves as the deputy coordinator of the National NAPE Intern Training Program, shaping the professional paths of pre-registrant pharmacists across Australia. His PhD research focuses on preceptor competency assessment, and his broader research interests encompass technology in teaching and learning practices, including embedding AI tools into classroom teaching to improve student engagement and understanding. So welcome, Andrew. Kenny Chan graduated from the University of Toronto's Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy in 2014 as part of The Last Train, the final Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy class. With over a decade of experience as a community pharmacist, primarily in small town independent settings, he has also explored the real estate industry, spending 4 years in residential and commercial sales. Now, as the co-founder of iSkyra, alongside Alexei Pukov, Kenny is focused on pioneering healthcare's integration with artificial intelligence. iSkyra's AI medication expert empowers clinicians with faster, evidence-based drug therapy decisions, bringing AI-driven support to modern healthcare. Next, we have Bita Johnzadeh, who earned her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Toronto in 2021. And after graduation, she pursued further training in programming and transitioned into a clinical software engineer role at Medicist, where she now serves as the lead developer of the Medicist Education Hub. Among her various projects, one of her current focuses includes developing AI-driven virtual pharmacy patient interactions, providing pharmacists with realistic community pharmacy scenarios to enhance their clinical practice and educational experience. And of course, last but not least, we have Dr. Jeff Nagy, who holds both a Bachelor of Pharmacy and a Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Toronto. He completed a pharmacy residency at the McMaster University Medical Center and spent several years as a clinical practice leader at the Toronto General Hospital. Jeff currently holds a position as a clinical associate professor at the University of Waterloo's School of Pharmacy. In addition to his academic role, he is actively involved in clinical practice, leading a referral-based hypertension clinic at the Centre for Family Medicine Family Health Team in Kitchener, Ontario. With a keen interest in cardiovascular therapeutics and anticoagulation, Jeff is also enthusiastic about incorporating technology into pharmacy education, recognizing its potential to enhance learning experiences. His efforts in using advanced technologies like generative AI to create realistic pharmacy simulations reflect his commitment to improving educational methods. Okay, so I will now hand over the floor to Andrew to share his demo with us.
Thanks very much, Minh-Hien. So what I'm going to be showing you today is just a very quick demonstration of this University of Sydney's Cogniti tool. And what Cogniti allows is for very efficient use of plain English prompts to create AI agents that you can interact with. And I'll just very quickly go over how I've been integrating that into some classroom teaching. So if I can just share my screen. Okay, everybody can see that okay? Yeah, excellent. So this is our tool that we have developed at the University of Sydney. Our Professor Danny Liu is in charge of this area and has been driving this. And let me just quickly show you what its capabilities are. And in this short 5-minute presentation, we're going to create an agent just to show how easy it can be done. So this is our dashboard where some of the agents that I've created, but we also have a range of other agents that other academics at the university have created that can be used as well. But the thing we're going to be doing today is the templates. So if we go to templates, there are some preset questions built into these templates that will help the AI to build an agent for you. So what we'll do this morning was we'll develop a Socratic tutor. And here it brings up our agent that we can use to create our tool. So we've got a couple of placeholders that we can use to fill here. And if I can just, what we'd like to do this morning is create an agent that will help my oncology students to interact with that content better. So if I put that into the agent, it's going to ask me a couple of questions about the specific topics, the level that we're teaching at, the goals that we want. And so that's a good place where I can actually put my learning outcomes from my unit of study. And then the style that I'd like to my agent to behave in. So we can then put that into the agent. And here's also a good place where I might just paste in my learning outcomes that I want. And so you can see it's building the agent on the left-hand side of the screen. And it might update that, just revise that as I add those learning outcomes as well. And then we can place an initial message. So help me to understand oncology. Okay, so we can then make that agent. It gives us a name, it tells us what it does. We can go into the prompt and we can then, if we like, we can adjust that prompt whenever, if we look at the way that the students use it, and we can change some of that description. We can choose the type of AI agent engine that it uses. So there's a selection of the GPTs that can be chosen. We can then start to add resources. So if there's particular rubrics that you're using, we can add files, we can add web pages, and we can also link to our learning management system, Canvas. So you can choose particular files or rubrics from Canvas, or your lecture material can all be added there. So the agent is drawing from that stuff that is known. And so we're starting to get trusted material. We can then put some limits on either who can access it and how they interact with it. And we can also lock down the privacy of that. We can also add some speech if we wish, and if we're using some chemistry formulations or calculations, the latex formatting really improves how that looks. So if we just save that, and then we're ready to go. From that point on, it's really quite an iterative process. And so you can use that in the classroom, and as students use it and you see how they're using it, because the back end gives me some insights and we can get a summary of the way that the students are interacting with it, the number of students and the types of questions. That really helps me to adjust my teaching. So if I can see there's particular topics that the students are finding difficult, or they're constantly asking about, that can sort of help me to adjust my teaching materials. So here's my oncology insight tutor has come up in my dashboard now. And if we chat, it's going to bring up that, and we can start to ask it. Maybe help me understand button. So then a Socratic tutor is then going to ask you questions rather than tell you answers. It's going to sort of talk you through a process. And so the way I use that in class is to maybe spread some topics around the class. They spend a fair bit of time interacting with it, getting a bit of a deeper understanding, and then possibly use it as a teach back method for the rest of the class. And so I think Annalise and Minh-Hien, that's probably my 5-minute presentation. And at the end of the discussion, I'm happy to put up a QR code about more how it works if people like.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing that. Next, I think I will ask Kenny to share his demo with us.
Yep, thank you, Annalise and Minh-Hien, for the introduction, and thank you, Andrew, for that demo. Well, I'm going to share my screen here. Give me one sec. Okay, so I'm not as talented as Andrew. I'm not able to do this live. So actually, this video has been pre-recorded. At least part of it's been pre-recorded. I will be speaking over it. And you can see it all right? Okay, perfect. So yeah, once again, my name is Kenny. I'm the co-founder of iSkyra, and we are helping clinicians and supporting clinicians to make faster and more informed drug therapy decisions. So you already know a little bit about me, but I want to highlight our co-founder, Alexei Pukov, who's also in the chat. He is actually completing his Master's of Science in Pharmaceutical Sciences here at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy. He's also our Chief Tech Officer, and he's also a self-taught full-stack software developer. So I just want to shout out Alexei. So as clinicians or as future clinicians, you know that in healthcare, every single minute counts. And the problem that doctors, pharmacists, and nurse practitioners are facing is that they're losing valuable time manually digging through databases to find drug information specific to their patients. And as this mountain of medical knowledge continues to grow and change, so does the pressure to find the right information at the right time. And so this is actually where iSkyra comes in with just-in-time knowledge. Our solution is an AI-powered tool that searches and delivers drug information 99% faster than before. So instead of spending 15 minutes on a clinical search, you're now doing it in 15 seconds. And so that's because we actually leverage our own curated drug information database with over 1 million credible medical references that represent best practices in Canada. Let's go into some of the details here. So our database is extensive and comprehensive, including clinical guidelines, drug product monographs, PubMed scientific articles, provincial formulary information. For example, we have Ontario in our database. We also have diabetes device manuals, as well as third-party insurance manuals, Canadian immunization guide, regulatory information. We also have clinical pearls and tips from reputable Canadian organizations, such as Choosing Wisely, ISNP Canada, Therapeutics Initiative, et cetera, et cetera. So now let's actually go into the demo. This is the user interface for our AI drug information assistant. So it looks very much like a ChatGPT style conversational agent. It's kind of like the one Andrew also showed. You can ask it simple questions, like what's the dose of this? What's the dose of that? What's the interaction of this? But you can also ask complex questions. So for the students in this room, this can definitely help you with your care plans, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I'm going to focus actually on the drug back orders, which is something that pharmacists deal with on a regular basis. So if you click this back order form, what you're going to do is we're looking for a therapeutic alternative to a medication that's unavailable due to a shortage or back order. And we want something that's not only a therapeutic alternative, but also covered under provincial formulary. So I've typed in, or I've previously typed in all forms of Spiriva for COPD, and then I'm gonna click submit. And you'll see in the chat bar, we've actually appended additional prompts to it. That's because we made it accessible so that you don't need to be a prompt engineer to get the best out of the system. So we already pre-create that prompt for you, and you're gonna click submit. So while it takes 15 seconds to work, I'm gonna show you what goes on in the background, so under the hood. So when a question goes to iSkyra, iSkyra analyzes the context of the question, and then it determines out of the entire database that we have access to, which of these databases would most likely answer the question based on the context. And so it's going to eliminate the ones that aren't really going to be relevant. So in this case, we're leaving the product monographs, clinical guidelines, as well as the provincial formulary, because we're not just looking at what's therapeutic alternative, we're also looking at what's an alternative that is also covered by the provincial or government formulary. So I have a few filters here. After that, it pulls the relevant documents from those sources, feeds it back to our AI. And we've given the AI a template on the back end saying, hey, listen, once you have the data, we want you to fill out this template and then present it as a form. And so now it's done. We've got a form's ready. You click open form, you download it. It's actually going to create a Microsoft Word document. And so we're going to zoom in here. So at the very top, you'll see that it says backorder shortage. And it's a Microsoft Word document, so you can edit it as you please. So the very top, pharmacy information, prescriber information, patient name, patient date of birth, etc. And at the bottom, it'll say the therapy you've prescribed is unavailable, which is Spiriva. Please prescribe one of these following therapeutic alternatives. In this case, our AI has provided Incruz, Seebri, and Tudorza. You can remove one or more of them as you please. Once again, it's a Word document. And then at the very bottom, the prescriber signature, that's where they would sign and date it. And of course, if you want, you can continue editing it and add some extra notes. So I'm going to stop that here. iSkyra is capable of doing a whole lot more than just backorder forms, but we chose this feature to show because it's a very practical feature that many of our users and customers have requested from us in terms of helping their workflow and efficiency. And that's it for me. I'm happy to send it over to Beta from Medicist.
Thank you so much for that demo, Kenny. I can go ahead and share my screen. So I'll start off with a quick background. So at Medicist, we have the Education Hub, which is free to sign up for, by the way. And we host a lot of courses for pharmacists here. And our newest course is called Breathe Easy. It's about preventing respiratory infections through vaccination. And it's an accredited course. You guys can check it out if you go to the link. I'll put it in the chat later. But many of you may recognize the instructor for this course is Dr. Sherilyn Hill from University of Waterloo. And how our idea for this, our AI, which is a virtual pharmacy experience, came about is basically throughout our courses, we have learning checks where we usually have quiz questions for our learners. In this course, at the end of every module, for example, module 1 is about pneumococcal disease, Dr. Hill has created really fantastic patient cases. But we were thinking to ourselves, what's the best way to use this patient case? Because in real life, you're not going to be presented with a written patient case with multiple choice questions under it, right? So there's a better way to do that. And we thought, okay, how about we create a virtual experience using AI? And basically, at the end of module 1, for example, you will encounter this patient. His name is Ethan Gray. And it's just as if Ethan Gray came to your pharmacy. He's a regular at your pharmacy, so you can check out his patient profile and you can read what medications he has. Some of these medications might be a hint that he has certain risk factors, but you can also have a conversation with the patient. He has a med check done that you can check out as well. But we also have patients who are new to your pharmacy. They don't have those tabs available. So it's supposed to be realistic. And the questions that Dr. Hill had throughout the case, we will have Ethan ask you. The virtual patient will ask you them. And also, we've prompted Ethan in this case to be pleasant, but we could have prompted him to be, for example, vaccine hesitant, and then you could practice having those conversational skills with a patient who it may be more difficult to convey these certain points to a patient who is vaccine hesitant. But in this case, Ethan is going to, he trusts you, he trusts the pharmacist. So let me just get straight into this. Now I'm supposed to be I'm the pharmacist and the AI will be my virtual patient. So I'll just say hi to him. And Ethan starts by saying, "Hi there, I recently ran into an old friend who had pneumonia, and it made me really worry about my own health. I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to protect myself, and I've already had my COVID and flu shots. Am I still at risk for pneumonia?" So I can say, sure, let's talk about that. First, do you have any medical conditions? And he will say, yes, I was diagnosed with hepatitis C 6 months ago, and I have high cholesterol and high blood pressure. So I'm going to make a mistake for the sake of time. I'm not going to ask Ethan further questions. I should be asking about his social history, and I'm going to miss some important points by missing that. But that's okay, because at the end we have a clinical evaluator that will give you feedback. And if you miss any important points, if you recommend an incorrect vaccine, that will correct you. But Ethan, just like in real life, if I recommend something that's not the best choice or something completely wrong, the patient wouldn't know, right? But at least this is a safe environment for me to make mistakes. For the sake of time, I'm just going to get straight into it and say, thank you. I recommend Prevnar 20 for you. And so within our case, we wanted to make sure that the user thinks about the patient's risk factors and also that they justify their recommendation. So I will just copy and paste an answer here to save time. I'm going to respond to him by saying, while it's true that pneumonia vaccines are often recommended for older adults, you have certain medical conditions that can increase your risk. That's why it's beneficial for you too, since you have hepatitis C. Okay, so in this case, he says, okay, I see, so that increases my risk. I'm going to be rude and say, yes, I have to go, just so that Ethan will leave. Bye. And Ethan will leave, but I should have asked him, do you have any more questions? I'll submit this for evaluation, and you will see that it's as if a clinical instructor is evaluating me. So it will praise me for recommending the correct vaccine, but I should have spent a little bit more time with the patient in my areas for improvement. It caught the fact that I missed the risk factors of smoking, alcohol consumption, and unstable housing, because I didn't even ask him about social history. And yeah, so there's a lot more that I want to show you, more cases, but the good thing is that this is live now and everyone in the audience can check it out. I'll put the link in the chat later, and you guys can sign up for the course and check it out yourself as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Beta. I'm going to hand the floor over to Jeff to present his demo now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm kind of like Kenny. I tape mine. You guys are so brave, Beta and Andrew. I can't believe that you actually did that live. That's fantastic. Let me just see here. I think that's shared there. Perfect. Hopefully you can all see this then. I just want to start off before I do the tape demonstration to give you a tiny bit of background so you understand where I'm coming from here. Where I got involved in using AI kind of came from a course that I've been offering at the University of Waterloo since 2007. It's the Management of Oral Anticoagulation Therapy course. And essentially it was designed to provide community pharmacists, hospital pharmacists, nurses, nurse practitioners with the skills that would enable them to be able to manage warfarin therapy. So it's a blended learning continuing education course. An online module had tests and lectures, and then you had to do case studies and demonstrate that you had a background knowledge about warfarin. And what really set this apart from most of the other courses that were in this space back then was that there was an experiential module. So every learner would come and spend 3 days with me in my point-of-care anticoagulation clinic in Kitchener, so that we'd see patients together. And it was a lot of fun because I'd be there with a patient, we'd do a point-of-care test, we could ask questions of the patient, and I could reinforce the learning for the learner as they were there in a real clinical environment. That worked out well for over 10 years. We had about 250 people take the course, about 50 people started clinics. That's great. But there are 3 main problems. Scalability. I could only take about 2 learners per clinic, so maybe 6 learners per month. So I couldn't expand beyond that. It was expensive because people would have to take time off work to come and spend time with me. And then geography was a big limitation. So the province of Nova Scotia wanted to send their learners to get this type of training. And again, it's a little bit far from there. I'm still convinced if I was in a sexier destination, like maybe Sydney, Australia, like Andrew, I think people would have come to see me, but Kitchener, Ontario, it's kind of a little bit of a harder sell. We did some research though, and it showed that experiential module was the most valued by people who took the course. So despite those challenges, we wanted to be able to maintain the experiential component. So what we did was we created a virtual anticoagulation clinic in partnership with an AI company called Amitros. And essentially what we did was we created 8 artificially intelligent simulated patients, and then we used a chatbot. And essentially learners would interact with these 8 patients over 8 occasions. So it'd be 64 visits in total. And that's on average the number of people that they'd be assessing over 3 visits with me. We started this back in 2018 using an older form of AI, Watson IBM, the one that took down the Jeopardy champions. And now we've subsequently upgraded to use GPT-4. So what I've got to share with you then is a brief demo. So this is what the learner would experience. There are 11 days. So this is day 5. Learner starts by looking at an electronic medical record. This is modeled after what you'd see in an anticoagulation clinic. Previous INR values, why the person's on warfarin. Today's INR is 3.8. So essentially that INR is too high. So what the learner would do then is go into the consultation with a Modi. And again, I've taped this because I'm so nervous about GPT-4 being down. So as you can see in green, it's the learner who's typing. Okay, so asking questions that you would expect. In blue, that's the artificially intelligent simulated patient. It's really important to note that all of the information that's clinically oriented that the patient provides is pre-programmed by me, the expert clinician. So we use the AI to facilitate this back and forth, but we do not use the AI to develop these characters. It's really important to note that when you're in an anticoagulation clinic, there's a systematic approach you need to do. You have to ask about 8 questions if an INR is out of range. So you can see an example here. I'm going to have the learner here ask a couple of the questions, but not all of the questions. So once again, I, as the instructor, developed all of these scenarios based on the types of patients you'd see in an anticoagulation clinic. And you can see this one was Ahmadi's been taking some Tylenol. Okay, and that's really what I wanted this to be about, is that his INR is elevated because he's been using Tylenol. So one of the things that we use the AI for too is you can see for non-clinical information. So this is where the learner's being a bit cheeky and saying, hey, so your shoulder's better, you can start playing squash. Can you give me a couple tips? So here's what Ahmadi says. That is not what I programmed in there. So that's where Ahmadi then is allowed now to go to his general knowledge database. And that's really an important part, I think, to add to the realism. I've actually had learners who complete the course going, hey, is Ahmadi still playing squat? Like, they actually believe he's real, like, for things like that. The other thing we use the AI for here is very similar to what Bita said. We can apply a rubric to this. So even though the learner found what the issue was, it was acetaminophen, they only asked 3 out of the 8 questions that they should be asking. So we can highlight here, hey, wait, even though you found it, make sure you remember to ask those. And as I alluded to before, the learners interact with these patients over 11 discrete days, and they have 64 interactions. So you can imagine by the end of the 64, they're pretty good at asking those systematic questions. The final way I use the AI, and this is the most exciting for me, really what I'm trying to do with this is recreate the experience of being in a clinical environment with a clinical expert. So I actually engage now, the blue is me, virtual Jeff Nagy. Notice I don't use an avatar for this because feedback from the learners has suggested that they really want to know how the expert manages these cases. So when I ask them what would they do with the warfarin dose, I can even supply some additional information pointing out what would be a reasonable way to do it, what is the way that I, Jeff Nagy, would do it, and what would be unreasonable. And I can also tie them back to some of the learnings earlier in the course. As you can see, then we ask, when should he come back for an INR test? Once again, I can share when I would have him back, but I would also highlight, look, if you were suggesting 2 weeks, that wouldn't be unreasonable too. So it can be very much like a discussion between the expert and the learner. And then the final thing to make them get into the habit of good practice is I want to know, what would you like to document about this? And at the end, I can apply a rubric to this as well. The rubric I use mainly for the undergrads because we have to provide some additional marks. For the CPD, that's not as important, that part of the grading. So with that, then the learner is complete and moves on to the next clinic day. Last slide I've got here is where this has led us. So at the University of Waterloo, we've established the Expert Virtual Clinical Training Hub. So the anticoagulation course has been running now for a number of years. I'm working now, really excited to be working with some Indigenous experts to provide some experiential training on how to improve cultural safety. I'm developing the hypertension clinic. That's my little baby. I can't wait to get that one going. And we're doing some vaccine training modules here as well. So that's where we're at now. And I hand back and look forward to.
Thank you, Jeff. So thank you, Andrew, Kenny, Bita, and Jeff for sharing those fantastic demos with us. And for now, I'd like to move on to our panel discussion and pose a couple questions to all of you for some discussion. So the first question is, as you know, there are many shifts within pharmacy education and practice today. For example, the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy will be launching its 3-year PharmD curriculum and program this September. So there is great prioritization of what and how we are teaching our future pharmacists. I'd like to hear from each of you. What skills and/or knowledge do you think should be prioritized to prepare future pharmacists for AI integrated healthcare environments? I'm going to start off with Andrew and we'll go around the room.
Thanks, Min. I think it's a great question. And I think what we need to be aware of is that we need to keep continuing to develop that critical thinking skills. And my feeling is that in order to do that, we need to ensure that students, they're going to use ChatGPT whether we like it or not. It's just how things are. I think we need to be teaching them how to use it properly. And that means that they need to differentiate a Google search from a ChatGPT inquiry. And also be aware of really that what ChatGPT and other language models can do for them. In the way that I've been teaching, it's about explain to me or help me to understand sort of inquiries rather than tell me sort of inquiries. And I think if we can do that, I think we can still build that critical thinking element. But the students need to realize that they're in control of that inquiry as well. So if they're looking at it, they're going through something, biases come into AI all the time, whether it's just the slight differences in language. Like as an example, we talked in a class the other day about challenges for an issue, and that to us could be positive challenges or negative challenges, but the AI sort of very much leant towards the negative. And so the students we were encouraging them to sort of steer it back towards, well, what might be a positive out of this situation as well. So those little things, the students need to be discerning about that. And so that's part of our training role, I think, as well.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Andrew.
but maybe I'll add a little bit to what Andrew said. He mentioned critical appraisal skills. I'm going to take another step as well and say critical questioning skills. And I'd like to coin the phrase, pharmacist detective. What that means is, as outputs of AI get better and better, like the text, the voice, video, and all that, the question comes down to how good is going to be the input, right? So what kind of information is the pharmacist gathering? What kind of questions are they asking from their patients in order to even get the right evidence to even potentially interface with an AI to get, a possible recommendation or additional information, right? So, take an example like someone comes in asking the pharmacist that they're getting persistent headaches on the weekend. Well, do you just give them acetaminophen, or maybe you ask them some more probing questions and then you find out, okay, well, this is actually due to caffeine withdrawal, right? Due to Monday to Friday drinking coffee, right? So these kind of questions will become, the ability to ask the right questions is even more and more important. And so these are some of the soft skills that I hope that, whatever faculty chooses to do more of.
Yeah, and I think that in order to help students with this shift where AI is going to be more and more prominent in our daily lives, like AI is going to revolutionize, if not already, diagnostics, drug discovery, how we access information. We have to prepare our students to be collaborators with these intelligent systems, and not just the traditional pharmacist role that we might have learned up to this date. So I agree, AI and data literacy is important, not in a technical way necessarily, but in a way to understand how AI tools work, their limitations, their risks, how to safely communicate whatever AI recommends to you to patients, for example. And also, I think that we can evolve how we teach students with our AI simulations that we demo today. We can offer safe ways for students to experience clinical training. So yeah, those are two ways that I think it can be very impactful for students.
Perfect. And I'll just tagline a tiny bit on what Beat is saying. Like, I look at it from the perspective of what faculty need to do. And I think it's interesting. Like, I went to the AFPC conference 2 years ago, and I was asked to be on a panel much like this. And it was talking about AI in pharmacy. And it was actually an AI in pharmacy. How do we keep students from using it? Like, it was like plagiarism and everything, right? And of course, here I am excited about using AI, and the guys stuck out like a sore thumb. So thank you to my co-presenters today for being on the same page as me. That's wonderful. But what I think we should start thinking about is what does it look like 5 years from now? So Min, it's interesting that you mentioned. So we're going to go to a 3-year PharmD program now. So we got to figure out ways to create space in the curriculum. So I've started using this anticoagulation training. We run an ambulatory pharmacy residency program at the School of Pharmacy. And so what I used to do is we get them to do the MOTE training before we had the simulated patients. And so they do the MOTE readings, the resident, and then they spend time with me in clinic. And it was an 8-week rotation. And by the last week, our goal was to have the learner running the clinic by themselves. Great. Now that we've included the AI training up front, the learners now are able to manage the clinic by week 3. So it's taken it's cut their training in half. And then they get the experience of those weeks then developing the skills of becoming independent about their clinical decision-making and so forth. So I think about things like the hypertension training. If we can start, supplement our didactic lectures and therapeutics with experience with maybe 2 or 3 artificially intelligent simulated patients afterwards, that can help our students then when they go on their appies and beyond and so forth. So I think, again, I'm obviously focusing on experiential training, but some of the tools that Andrew and Kenny have pointed out as well, I think, again, getting the students to use those sooner embedded within our curriculum, I think can help us free up some time perhaps. So thank you.
Great, thanks for all those comments. Those are all really important things to consider when thinking about this space. So thank you for that. Our next question for discussion is the tools you've shown us highlight the vast potential of AI, and today's discussions often center on both the exciting possibilities and the inherent risks associated with AI usage. So along that thread, I want to turn us now to considerations related to equity with AI technology. So can you tell us about if and how you and your colleagues have thought about equity when developing or implementing AI as a pharmacy training tool? And for this one, I'll start off with Kenny.
Yeah, so I guess I'll speak more specifically about iSkyra and our AI drug information assistant. So when I think about the word like equity, I'm also thinking about accessibility, affordability, diversity, and usability, right? So maybe I'll talk about each of those. So obviously, as AI becomes, more and more prevalent, and the benefits are even more and more well known, at what point do we think that not using AI is actually inequitable, right? And so there's a time when, and how do we make sure that at that moment that we don't leave AI only for the rich countries or the richest populations, right? How can we make it more accessible and equitable for everybody? And part of it is affordability. Another part of that is language diversity, right? All these language models are mostly English, but at what point can we make an advancement so that people can input in multiple? We're almost there, but how can we improve inputs in multiple languages and outputs in multiple languages? How can we tailor the responses of AI to be matching the literacy level or the language level of the user themselves? So these are all things that we think about at iSkyra when we design our AI systems, and and we just want to think about how can we make sure that more and more people can access it in a way that is the most user-friendly, right? And that's one of the many things that we focus on at iSkyra when we're building our AI drug information assistant. I can keep going on, but I'll let other people talk first.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. I think like just using the Cogniti tool as an example, being built specifically for the University of Sydney, but it's applicable, and other universities are now using it as well. It's using various GPT models that can be embedded directly into a learning management system, and that means any student is then having access to that. You can build your own agents, customize them. So each unit of study coordinator is able to customize particular chatbots, but you can also just create a standard GPT-4 tool that you can just put in Canvas, and that means that all students are having access to the same large language models without the issues of who's paying for it and who can afford a subscription and so forth. So that's one way that at least that at the University of Sydney, we're trying to create that sort of equal opportunity for access to these tools.
Yeah, and I suppose the considerations of equity, I'll acknowledge that I didn't necessarily think about this immediately when I thought about using it in this form, but using this for this experiential training is by definition almost increasing equity, because we're removing barriers to access. I'm making it less costly for individuals to train in this way. So we've actually spoken to one of our former adjunct faculty members is in Africa now, and so we're thinking about ways that we can actually make this available to, again, maybe countries that aren't as resource rich as we are in Canada to provide some of this specialized clinical training there. The equity is also in the expert design in the characters. So I want to make sure that the characters are representative of the communities that we serve as well. So that's one way too, instead of relying on the language models, which we know have inherent biases in determining that. So again, making sure that I'm making those characters as good as possible. The other way that we do it then too is, and maybe this gets beyond the concept of equity, but we actually do have a restricted model. So we actually are very careful about, if there's any offensive language that's used, it's actually locked out of the system. So anything, it's pretty much all of the things that sometimes if it's over a beer, like the fun discussion, like politics and things like that, if anyone mentions anything like that, the system actually refuses to respond to it. So there are some controls that we can have on these systems as well that help that, to make sure that there's no inflammatory language or so forth. So that's kind of how we've incorporated that into our design.
And I'm going to be echoing a lot of the points already shared, but I think equity is really important when it comes to using AI in healthcare. So as mentioned, AI uses human data. So if biases exist in human data, it can be mimicked or magnified by AI. For example, if we were to have the AI to create our patient cases, there could be a lot of bias in that. So for example, if I Google the word flight attendant, it's going to be mostly pictures of women. If I Google the word software engineer, it's mostly men. So imagine if an AI were to use that data to make its predictions, it's going to be biased as well. And I think one important step that we all can just start by doing now is knowing that this algorithmic bias exists, and it's crucial to know it's there, and students have to be taught not to just blindly trust whatever AI gives you. But you have to think about whatever information you have from the AI critically and ethically. But also, it's not just bad news. There's lots of opportunities that AI presents to that, for example, AI patient simulations, like we mentioned, we're giving students equal access to these clinical experiences. And I think that even if the AI training data may be biased and it may lead to inequity, what we can do on our part is to make sure we design our own patient cases that are inclusive and that they fill in those gaps. And that's something that we have control over as educators and developers. And all of us, everyone in the audience, we have to be advocates for more careful and critical use of AI as it becomes more ingrained in our lives.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you for your commitment to equity and diversity and inclusion, understanding, the risks and harms that can come with this technology. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that. My next question has to do with the examples of AI that you've shown. So you've shown a great variety of examples of how we can use this technology in pharmacy practice and in education. But I'm curious to dig a little bit deeper into the process of developing the tools, and specifically the role of collaboration between healthcare providers, technology companies, and other stakeholders. So how have you gone about ensuring that your tool is designed with pharmacists and patients as end users in mind? And what were some of the most important considerations along the way? For this, I'll start with Vida.
Sure, thank you for that. So I think that's a really good question too. And I think one thing that's really cool about all of our products is that it's basically made by pharmacists for pharmacists. I think that's true for all of our demos. And basically, our patient scenarios, they're powered by Gemini, Google's LLM. And one thing we had to keep in mind is that we can't rely on Gemini doing the clinical evaluations, as Dr. Nagy mentioned as well. We had to create that rubric, for example, for Gemini to use, and we strictly have prompted Gemini to only evaluate the user based on that. We made the virtual patient agnostic, for example. So our tools for Medisys is only for pharmacists. So we don't have any patient-facing AI at this point. But since the patient is agnostic, the Gemini has a little bit more free will there as well. So you can have conversations with, for example, Ethan, not strictly related to the conversation and he will still respond, but we have to make sure that we have a catch for if the for the evaluation by a different AI endpoint at the end. So that was one way we made sure, okay, the user can have a realistic conversation, but still we make sure they learn the important points, and if they make a mistake, they're corrected. And yeah, I think that's what we had to do to make sure that it's a safe and powerful learning tool.
I don't know if I'm going in order, but my kind of is very similar to what Beta's is too. It's so I partnered with Amitros, and so the founder of Amitros was a graduate of the software engineering program here at University of Waterloo, and he specializes in languages. And so when they came and we're looking for solutions to provide this experiential training, like when I asked him what we were looking for, he said, you know what, this is actually probably the best use of our product. Like they had been designing, it was business cases. Like, so he worked with business schools, like how do you deal with an angry email from a client or things like that? That's what. So when I described what the Warfront Clinic was like, he goes, this is even better. So it was a really neat partnership, and we kind of learned together as we developed this. What Beta was saying that what I've struggled with over time is I'm very careful too. I alluded to the fact that we have a very restricted system. So I wanted this to be as realistic as possible. So I wanted to use like the native GPT backbone and then also just supplement it with what I have. But the problem would be, again, pharmacists being pharmacists, they would go on and they would ask things like, oh, hey, Amadi, I see that you're taking a diabetes medication. How's your diabetes? And of course, I wouldn't have programmed any info about that, right? So then Amadi would go and he would provide this whole backstory about his diabetes. I'm like, and so I was so worried about whether the information was going to be accurate, right? If it got into some of the clinical. So I want to be very clear, and it sounds like Bija's doing the exact same thing. It's so important that the learner trusts that what information they're going to be given in this training environment is 100% expert vetted. So I don't know when we're going to get to the, I'm sure we will at some point, but I don't know when we're going to get to the point where we can sort of kind of give them more free reign. But that's been the biggest design consideration that we've had to consider is I've probably locked it down almost too much to some extent. You can still ask about squash tips, but you couldn't ask about, hey, did you see who won the Toronto Blue Jay game yesterday? It wouldn't be able to do that because of that. So those are some of the considerations if you're working with the companies to again, remember, as a pharmacist, we want to make sure that this is all vetted clinical information, I suppose. So.
Yeah, and the way at Sydney University, like we're making sure that the information that it's using comes either directly from the text that we're using or the lecture material that we're using or the tutorials that we're using. And so we can steer our agents in that direction. I tend to use it because we're using it on probably much smaller scale, and it's, you know, an individual unit of study can build their own one. And the way I've done it with my students actually is to say, let's do this together. What kind of things do you want it to do? And let's try and see if we can create a little virtual tutor for you. So it's very much an iterative process. The students tell me what it does, what to do. I'll do that. They'll try it that week. They come back the next week and they go, oh, could it do this? Or you can see how they, in the back end, you can see how they try and break it. And so that's always a little bit of fun for me to try and make sure I stop them from breaking it by putting some other controls in. So yeah, it ends up being a bit of a collaborative approach with my students.
Yeah, man, I don't have much more to add other than, you know, as one of the developers of our AI drug information assistant, we work constantly with our users and customers, right? Which at this point are mostly pharmacists and clinicians. So, you know, we're always asking them, you know, do you want this feature? Is this feature important to you? What are your other pain points? Is this accurate to you? Do you have any other suggestions? And then we just keep iterating and iterating upon that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that. We actually have time for an audience question. So I'm going to pull this one from the Q&A. Can the AI detect when students are struggling with a concept and intervene with a different teaching approach? Does anyone want to tackle that one? Any thoughts?
I can say what happens in my course. So
Yeah.
in that clinical debrief again that happens, and this is for the other modules that we're developing too. So in that clinical debrief where the learner has already interacted with the patient, and now they're trying to suggest a course of action, like the way I've embedded it for the anticoagulation and for the hypertension, you get two chances. Like, what dose do you think we should use for this? And the hypertension is different. What drug do you think we should use? So you can give them two options. If they don't get that second option, again, I can pre-program the information in there about where that learner should go back and refer to either a lecture that I gave that's in part 1 of the course, or maybe there's a paper that they should review, or a clinical pearl that we've covered somewhere else. So that's kind of how. So it's the AI model is interpreting what they're saying and going, yeah, this is not one of the acceptable answers that Jeff coded, and then we can provide the appropriate kind of redirection, if you will, back to the information that will help them. So that's how it works in my model, I guess you would say.
And for our model, basically, if I were to give completely false information to the patient, to Ethan, he would act like a real patient and he would just trust me. I could create a patient that's maybe he has a little bit more background, for example, and maybe they would oh, that was an idea that we had. Like they would say, wait, are you sure? It's like, my doctor told me this one, and then you can rethink about what you just suggested. So and then our fallback is the clinical evaluation. But in the moment, it really depends on how we made the patient. Do they have a lot of information, or are they more agnostic, more naive? So yeah, that's that's our approach.
And another question from the audience here. Can the AI model in uncertainty? So can it model uncertainty in clinical scenarios that would actually prompt or force a student to come up with multiple approaches rather than like one approach? Have you encountered that with your tools?
In a sense, for Ethan's case, for example, there's more than one appropriate vaccine to recommend. Any of those would have been acceptable responses. This is maybe a little bit along those lines. And if you, so we can tell the clinical evaluator, this one's correct, this one's correct. This one is not the worst choice, but not the best choice. And then it would share that information in the evaluation.
Yeah, and that's a very similar approach that we use in the hypertension module we're developing. We have a shared decision-making module to teach people how to do that. So maybe that's what the question's getting at a bit, perhaps, is that, so, if a guideline is saying to do X, like treat to a blood pressure less than 140, if there's a reason why the patient doesn't feel comfortable with that, then that's going to force the learner then to choose something else. And like, I can't wait to get this one out there, because I know a lot of pharmacists, because I know pharmacists in Zub and Austin would tell us this, they want to follow rules, right? So what if the patient doesn't want to follow the rules? So that's kind of how we're incorporating that uncertainty into some of the interactions, kind of the more the gray, if you will. And as Beta's been pointing out, and I totally agree with her, it's like, it's a very safe environment to practice with uncertainty, right? So it's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be advising to go against the guidelines. Well, yeah. And so you can see, look, the world didn't end. It was okay. That patient's going to be fine. So that's how we're incorporating some of the uncertainty into our models.
Okay. Thank you both for sharing those responses. We are almost out of time, so I just want to thank each of you for coming today to share your demos and for participating in such a thoughtful discussion on how AI is impacting pharmacy. This is such a huge topic, and I'm sure it will continue to be a huge topic for the near future. So really appreciate you sharing all your insights. And now I'm just going to pass things over to Annalise for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Min. And I'd love to add my thank you to each of our 4 panelists and presenters today. I think we covered a lot of ground. I warned everyone it was a jam-packed agenda. But I think really heartfelt thanks for such a thoughtful and meaningful contribution to the ways that we're approaching some of the uncertainty in the world today, as you said, Jeff. I think it's coming at a time where that is just absolutely so important. I am just going to encourage our presenters, if you have any other resources or links that you'd like to share in the chat, please feel free to do so. I'm also just going to put my email into the chat if our presenters and or audience members want to connect on any of the things as a follow-up from today's event. Happy to field questions, comments, feedback, all of the above. But a very, very warm thank you to everyone online today and participating in this conversation. A quick plug for our CPE Speaker Series. We have 2 more events taking place in May and June before we take a break over the summer. So you can access our site through the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy for more of our event postings. Thank you to everyone online today. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And Andrew, all the best with the start of your day in Australia. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, Annalise. Thanks all.